let's just get right into this. We're going to talk about Moon Knight first because I feel
Ooh.
like you guys want to hear the Doctor Strange one, and if we're going to be good content creators, then we got to make you wait for it. So you got to watch the Moon Knight review first, and then you can watch the Doctor Strange one. Of course, Nick and I are both on Twitter. Please follow us on our various accounts. That is linked below. But with all that being said, let's just hop right into it. So, Moon Knight. Let's
hmm
just get your general thoughts. Just overall feelings. Did you enjoy your time watching Moon Knight, or did you struggle a bit?
Um, so that's kind of like a loaded question. Without going off on a rant, I think that Moon Knight has had a lot of positives in it, but overall, I didn't really enjoy Moon Knight. It felt very like run of the mill Marvel, very run of the mill like superhero show. For me, I wouldn't say a long time Moon Knight reader, but somebody who has recently become very invested in the character, having read a large amount of Moon Knight comics to make content. I would say that I don't really feel like the show was very indicative of the character's past. It handled a lot of different things, not so great. And I know that people oftentimes get mad when you talk about how comic accuracy isn't as important in the MCU, in DC films, and things like that. But I feel like for a character like Moon Knight, who's relatively niche, a lot of people have heard of him, but not so many people know a lot about him. It would have been great to see them be a bit more faithful, because I kind of feel like it was that inside. It's almost like, oh, I can't wait to tell you about this like inside thing that me and these other people have, and then you tell them about it, and they get there, and it's not like that at all, kind of a thing. So I think the show itself had some good parts, but overall, I wasn't a huge fan of it.
So, just to frame this a bit, going into Moon Knight, I think overall, most people, maybe not everyone, but I think the general audiences were kind of hit or miss on what Marvel has been doing with the Phase 4 television shows, at least thus far. There have been a lot of great highs. Loki, we both agree, was very, very good. Falcon and the Winter Soldier, but there were also some lows, notably Hawkeye, some episodes of What If, not really feeling all that well. WandaVision, I think, was a mixed bag. Everyone was kind of really into it at the start, and then it sort of fizzled out in the finale. They didn't sort of stick to what we were expecting. It was all very MCU feeling, if you get what I'm saying, because the MCU has a certain style, and we'll get into more of this when we talk about Doctor Strange. But the MCU has a distinct style, and they stay in that lane for the most part. The greatest departures from that, of course, being the Defenders series on Netflix. And a lot of people, I think, were expecting something more akin to Daredevil and less like Avengers or Hawkeye or whatever you want to compare Moon Knight to. Kevin Feige had hyped the show up, saying that it was the most violent show. That quote was spread all
Everywhere.
throughout the internet.
Yeah,
So
for sure.
everyone was very excited about the prospect of a more grounded, a more gritty, a more mature version of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which honestly we really never have gotten in its entirety outside of Daredevil. The closest thing in like the greater MCU would probably be like Winter Soldier or something like that, as far as like something that's a little bit more mature and not as goofy. So, going in with those expectations, I think a lot of people were let down by the tone of it. And that goes into what you were mentioning, the comic book accuracy of the character, where the MCU diverges in some places. I think a lot of people agree that they make good decisions, but they're not always perfect. And there were a lot of changes made to the character from the comic book version to the one that we see on screen. So, In your opinion, do you think that the changes that were made, because most people have never read a Moon Knight comic in their lives, and they're not going to really care about the comic book accuracy, the fact that it is pretty much exactly the same as what Marvel always does. Do you think that that was a big deal and a missed opportunity to do something more with
For
a
sure.
character that people don't know at all?
For sure. And I'll explain why. I've been making this joke for the last week or so, um, about Moon Knight. And I guess if you look past timelines when certain characters were introduced and things like that, which character got a live action appearance first, Moon Knight was essentially Spawn, the film, remade in 2022
You're
with
talking about
different
the show, not the comic, right?
correct.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm talking about the show. So it's basically the same plot. They adjusted Moon Knight's powers, they adjusted his background, and they kind of made it very, very, very easy to digest. I mean, there were some elements of it that were a little bit more confusing if you're not, familiar with the source material. I saw a lot of people talking about different personality traits that Mark's alter egos, alternate personalities had visible to them in the comics, and it just seemed like there wasn't really one area of the show where they said we're going to definitively stick with the comics as source material. Like his alternate personas, his alternate personalities weren't right. His background and like what he is, kind of what he's been known for with those alternate personalities didn't seem accurate or even tonally close to where they are in the comics. And I think this stuff is important when you have, I mean, if it's a character who, let's say like Layla's character in the show, where she's a brand new character and she becomes a version of another character throughout the show that necessarily doesn't really have a huge comic book history, I think it's okay to tinker with those. But you kind of, when you have a character who has a large fan base like Moon Knight, I think you probably should have stuck to a lot of the elements that have made that character popular over time, instead of kind of turning him into a run-of-the-mill cape hero, who also happens to have dissociative identity disorder.
Yeah, I think a lot of people took that criticism, and there are a lot of Marvel Cinematic Universe like staunch defenders who will never say that there's anything wrong with it. But I think those people sort of took that criticism and brushed it aside as not really that important, because how many people have really gone into the Moon Knight comics? But I mean, if you're a Marvel comic book reader that's very avid, you know of Moon Knight and you're a fan of the character.
Well,
So
can I hold on?
keeping,
Can I say one thing?
yeah,
I think that line of thinking is one of the things that is most disrespectful to me about that 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 argument to me is kind of disrespectful in a way,
no,
and
I
it's
agree. I
because
was gonna say, what if you
it's
did that
because
to Batman?
well, exactly, is you have all of these tremendous writers and artists throughout history that you're essentially not plagiarizing, but you're taking elements from some of the things that they've done, and uh, you're how do I want to put this? I won't say it's that you're not committing to them, but you're like using them in name for marketing and propaganda purposes, and then not following through by giving people, kind of what they expect. And I feel like it's a bit of a bait and switch. Uh, these stories and these characters became popular for a reason, and like using that popularity as a gateway to tell just a shit tier story is kind of disingenuous to me. I felt like the show itself was fine. I'm trying not to make it sound like it was like the worst thing ever, but it definitely wasn't what I would consider to be a strong entry or a unique entry into the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It had some new interesting elements to it, but I think overall it was still extremely run of the mill, very formulaic.
So going off of the just running with the idea that okay, they changed it. And like I had mentioned earlier, if you're going to change a character's I guess entire backstory to the point where they're kind of unrecognizable to the person that's familiar with that, that sucks, especially for big fans of the character. But how it works within the context of the show, I think it's a little bit more forgivable when you kind of understand what they were going for. Obviously, it's a different version of the character. You'd like it to be much more comic book accurate, or at least more familiar to what we're used to seeing in the comics. And I think what Moon Knight and what most of these characters bring from the comic books is valuable. And there's a lot of great stories to tell. But within the context of the show, having not read a ton of Moon Knight comics, only like a handful, I felt a little... I wasn't really on board with it until the episode where we found out, where Steven came from and how Mark's dissociative identity disorder manifested itself. And after seeing that, I was much more on board with how they were going about it. Did that specific episode change your mind as an avid Moon Knight fan who's read hundreds of Moon Knight comics at all, and sort of give you the chance to, I guess, reassess, take a step back and be like, okay, this version is still providing something interesting,
I would say that,
something of value?
Yeah, I'd say from that perspective, the entire show and most things that I digest from Marvel, I do that with. I try to disassociate the comic book version with what I'm watching, because I know that they're not going to sync up. But I was kind of hoping for at least a little bit more accuracy. I would say that, to your point, episode 5 is probably the strongest episode of the series. It definitely had the best emotional and performances in the show. It probably added the most backstory, gave the characters and actions of the show the most weight. But overall, I still think that it was it was kind of like, to me, it was kind of like a little bit too little too late for me at that point. Like I'm saying, I do still think that there's a lot in the show to like and to build upon, but this first specific 6-episode run just didn't hit for me. And I think that's another thing that Marvel shows are kind of guilty of, at least the ones on Disney Plus, is I feel like they all, in some cases, they need to tell a more focused story, but in this case, I really felt like they needed another 2 episodes after the first. I think
they're all a little rushed.
If you look at the first 5 episodes, I think there was a total. I can go when I'm going to make a longer, more well put together illustration of my thoughts on the show later, because I haven't really done a video essay in a while. But I will tell you that. I think that there was a total of about two actual minutes, like 120 seconds of total footage of Mark Spector as Moon Knight in the entire show until the last episode. So if you're like a very casual viewer, I know I had a lot of people that are not comic book heads like us calling me and being like, is this show ever going to get around to having a superhero in it? And I was like, I get it. Like, I know. Just bear with me. We're going to get there,
Yeah, and I agree with you on the 6-episode structure. I think it's really bad. I think most of the scripts don't have enough content to even fill the 6 episodes, so they need to add more if you're going to even do this limited amount of episodes, because they all feel like we're rushing. And then the finale just like came out of nowhere. And we're like, okay, now we're having a giant kaiju god battle above the pyramid and all this stuff. So I personally would like more episodes and more time devoted to delving into the motivations and the characters themselves. Because honestly, I feel like the writing was pretty shallow from like character development standpoint. And we're gonna get into a lot of that during Doctor Strange. But I felt like Oscar Isaac was really, really carrying and elevating the material he was given. The jokes, I thought without his charisma, a lot of them would have just flopped. And I think he did really carry the emotional scenes to the point where he's making things that aren't necessarily that interesting more interesting. So I think that's a testament to him, and I think the rest of the cast was very good as well, but especially Oscar.
I think Oscar definitely carried the show in terms of essentially, if you think about it, he had to play two parts the whole show, two completely different characters.
Right.
And then towards the end, obviously there was a third character that he played, but that I don't think there's nearly enough there to even be able to say that that counts as a third character he was playing. But um, he was playing essentially Mark Spector and Stephen Grant, two very different characters throughout the entire show. So he definitely deserves a ton of props for what he was capable of doing, even if I would say the Stephen Grant persona wasn't super accurate or super. I mean, I really just didn't find much there other than like comic relief. I think Ethan Hawke did a really good job as essentially an unnamed, not an unnamed, but a one-time used comic book character. He was a very, I would say he was a pretty menacing character, at least as far as like zealots go. But
I
I
didn't
mean,
find him all that interesting, to be honest. I thought he was good in the show, but
yeah,
I thought
he did
Arthur
what he
Harrow
could
as a
do.
character was
Yeah,
nothing.
he did what he could do with what he was given. Like there wasn't really a lot of depth. The one character who I thought needed a significant more amount of screen time was Layla Al Fooey.
Really? I
Like
thought
that,
she had a
yeah.
lot. I thought Arthur Harrow out of anyone needed a lot more.
Do you think?
Yeah. I don't know anything about this guy.
Yeah,
What's his back
but there's
like?
nothing to know.
I know he was Khonshu's avatar. That's all we know. We
Yeah, his
don't know.
motivation.
We
His
don't know.
motivation didn't make a whole lot of sense either, because he
Why
was
don't
like,
we?
"Hey,
Why?
I used to be Khonshu's avatar, right? And I didn't like it. I didn't like killing people in the name of vengeance. But what I do like is killing everyone in the name of stuff they haven't even done yet." It was like the movie Minority Report, except on like a biblical scale. It didn't make
I
any sense why his motivations would be that. But
we're talking about
again,
the show having more episodes. I think you have at least
one
two, three,
dedicated to him.
four on Layla and Arthur's backstories and like what they've got going on. Like compare this to, and I hate to do this, but all right, let's not even compare it to
Do
Daredevil.
it.
Compare it to
Peacemaker.
Peacemaker, where we have specific episodes dedicated to what's going on with these
True.
characters, and they really delve into their motivations, their wants, their desires, their fears, and I don't know who Arthur Harrow is. I can't care about him because you never told me anything. There's nothing to latch on to. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
in Daredevil season 3, we have an entire episode that's just dedicated to Karen's backstory. I don't think Matt's in a single second of it. It's one of the
Hmm.
best episodes in the entire series because you
It took
take
him
the
3 seasons to get there, though.
yeah, I mean that's true, but you take the time out to give us character development. We're gonna care more about what's going on. So
One of
I
the
think the 6 episode thing is just not working.
I think overall one of the things that I was most looking forward to, at least when I heard that Moon Knight was going to be announced, is I hadn't read as much Moon Knight as I really wanted to up until that point. Now I've read like everything, but up until that point, I really liked the fact that Moon Knight was essentially a very street level hero. Like he was super mega rich in the comics, but he was another street level hero, and that's kind of what I was hoping for in this show, was a more grounded, gritty kind of story where maybe it was set in a big city, and then the more and more I saw of it, I kind of felt like this is going to be another big spectacle. And I know
Yeah,
we just had a story set in New York with Hawkeye, but that show was dog shit. So um,
we wanted a
I was
reboot.
hoping I was hoping that maybe we were going to get, and again, Moon Knight is a very, he's in the comics for the majority of the time in the comics, he doesn't have any crazy powers, healing, anything like that. He's just a brutal hand-to-hand fighter. And I was really hoping that we were going to get something along the lines of the Daredevil, hallway fight scenes, stairwell fight scenes, things like that. It
Anything.
didn't have to be as gory, but I was literally heartbroken to see like what they did with the battles, which is just as many cuts as you can possibly put in a fight without it like just turning into absolute jello and just random superpowers that I feel like I don't, at least I'm not saying that there's never been a time in comic books where Moon Knight didn't have super strength and speed and healing, because he has, but it felt a little samey. I would have rather had him be the street level hero that he is, at least that he's been for like the last 2.5, almost 2 decades, 3 decades.
Yeah, I don't mind the like big bombastic kaiju god battle turning back the sky, but in like season 3 maybe we ramp up to that. But let's establish a little bit of Moon Knight's vibe. He was Moon Knight for years in the MCU before the show even started. You know? And
can you imagine showing somebody the first 2 episodes and then showing them the last episode? They'd be like, "What? Wait, what is going on? There's a gigantic alligator or crocodile fighting a bird skeleton?" Like I get it. Like within the context of the show, it makes sense. It was just a lot. It was just a lot for a 6-episode season to try to throw at you.
Yeah. So let's talk about the action a little bit, because that's like the thing Marvel fans really hang their hat on. They're like, the action's a big thing. And I remember if you talk about like WandaVision, everyone was like, "Where's the action? Where's the Marvel? This isn't a Marvel show. What is this? What is this?" And then they got it in the finale, and that was like the worst episode. So in this series, there's a lot more.
In our opinion.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. For sure. Our opinion. But
some people like really love that episode, and I'm like, that's fine, man. You do you.
But
I'm gonna just put my head in the microwave.
In this series, I really liked what they were doing early on, where Steven was kind of confused and not knowing what was happening, and then it would hard cut back, and then Mark had done this badass shit, right? That I thought was cool. But then once you get Mark, now let's stop with that. And then we get to the finale. This is supposed to be the big crescendo, the payoff to everything. Yeah. They're fighting the villain. Hard cut. The fight's over. Yeah. That was so underwhelming. And I get like we want to save the Jake Lockley reveal for the post-credit scene. But you don't need to save it for the post-credit scene, because the post-credit scene was like 5 minutes later. It wasn't in the next episode.
So this is such an overwhelming. I know I'm being negative. I'm sorry. I'm going to be positive. I'll probably be more positive in the Doctor Strange side of things. But one of really, 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 really big problem that Marvel is having in Phase 4 is that everything seems like it's a commercial for something else. And when you expect a payoff of a fight between Harrow and Moon Knight, for them to have cut that out so that you could have just a tad more emphasis on the reveal that Mark Spector has a third alternate personality that you're not aware of in Jake Lockley, or at least that the average viewer wasn't aware of. You were essentially robbing Peter to pay Paul. You were saying, "Hey, we're not going to give you this awesome battle that you waited 6 episodes to see. Instead, we're going to give you just a small hint of how badass this other personality might be. But we're not going to show you, because God knows when the second season's going to be." And again, first and foremost, Jake Lockley is not a badass in the comics. He's like a streetwise like cabbie who also, I mean, he's very brutal, but he's not that guy. But to pull that out of there, that's really the only way I can describe it, is like you're robbing Peter, you're robbing the viewer to pay or to essentially hype up whatever the next thing is that you do with this character, whether it be season 2. And that kind of sucks to me. Like you took away some of the payoff of waiting 6 episodes for this, I felt like Layla had more action in the final episode than Moon Knight actually did. You're muted.
My bad. But yeah, sorry. That's what I was saying about Layla. She got a huge spotlight put on her in the last episode, more so than even Moon Knight himself, and that's cool. You had to establish her as a new character, but with more episodes, everyone gets their time to shine, and the show is Moon Knight. But exactly what you were saying about the finale is you're cheapening the actual show itself to tease something that might not ever come to fruition in the way that you're advertising it as. If you're, and again, all you're saving the Jake Lockley reveal for is literally 5 minutes later after the credits have rolled. You tell us what happened.
Yeah.
So you already established the hard cut for Jake earlier when they're on that cliff and all the people get killed and Steven's like, what happened? And Mark's like, that wasn't me. Was that you? No, it wasn't me either. So now you already have that. Now you pay that off in the finale when Jake takes over, just brutalizes everyone. That's what we wanted to see.
I don't know why I'm thinking of it like cutting away and then him being like, who is this guy? Because nobody, like, the people interacting with Mark Spector don't know he has multiple personalities for the most part. Layla does, but no one else does. But could you imagine it cutting away and he like transitions to Jake and he's like, hey, I'm Jake Lockley, Haro. He'd be like, what? What are you talking about? Like, it's time to get, you're muted again, bud. I don't know why you keep doing that.
Sorry, the people that watch the stream, obviously you don't. I live by a very busy street, and there are cars that drive by that make a lot of noise. So on the rewatch, or even live, I don't want people to hear that. So, you hear that? That's why. Okay, well, they can hear it. That's why I mute. Anyway, so yeah, that was super underwhelming. That sucked a lot. But let's talk about the gods.
Somebody in the podcast or in the chat, BlazeCat, asked, I wonder what Jake Lockley's suit is going to look like. They actually already discussed that. The producer said that they were initially thinking of showing Jake off in this season, or Jake's suit persona, and it was going to be the black and white suit that he wears in a lot of modern appearances. If you look at the second half of the 2014 run that ended, I think the first 6 episodes first 6 issues were by Warren Ellis, and then the next one, Jesus, I don't remember who wrote it. But in that series, he switched to from the all white suit to like a very black suit. You know what? I have an action figure of it. I'll get it in 2 seconds, and I'll show you exactly what it looks like. But it's a black suit with a white hood, and the inside, his cape's white on the outside. That's black. So I think it's just supposed to be a manifestation of it being a little darker.
So let's talk about the gods a little bit. Khonshu, Amit, Harrowet. How did you feel about them? Do you like them? I thought Khonshu was a bright spot for sure.
I thought that those were actually the best parts of the show. I thought that they were unique. They had good dialogue. They gave you just enough of their motivations and what they were up to make them like valuable additions without like overdoing it. Mark's relationship to Khonshu is obviously very important. They have a very on again, off again type of thing. Sometimes they are best pals, and sometimes they're literally at each other's throat. Khonshu has abandoned him many times in the comics for other people, but always comes crawling back. And Taweret was fun. I don't recall ever seeing her in the comics anywhere, but that doesn't mean that she's not there. I just might not have ever got to it. She was fun. The actress that played her did great. And then Amit was a thing that existed, was fine. Amit in the comics is kind of just, again, it's very similar, just kind of like a thing that exists, but it was fine. That part of it was fun. I think Khonshu was like really the one that I was concerned with, and I thought the actor that played them as well as the design that they used for it was great. Especially at the end when he was rocking like the Mr. Knight suit in the back of the limo. That was sick.
Yeah, that was clean. Yeah, Khonshu I think was a really high point. I think he was the perfect way to do the balance of like comedy to seriousness. Like they took Steven to be that, but I feel like you didn't need it when you could have Mark as the straight man and Khonshu as the sort of comic relief in a sort of dry way where he's kind of roasting him most of the time. If you think of like
me and you,
yeah, or Afro Samurai, where the main character does not talk at all, but his sidekick basically does all of his speaking for him and is sort of like the comic relief. You can have something similar to that, obviously not to that level, but I think that would have been a lot of fun and a cool way to do it. So overall thoughts.
That's kind of the relationship that Maximus has with Black Bolt in the comics, where Black Bolt can't say anything because if he does, he'll just vaporize whoever's near him. So Maximus just shit talks for him on behalf of him all the time. So
So final thoughts on Moon Knight. I really thought it was just your sort of standard MCU stuff. I thought that a lot of the action was pretty miss for the most part. Like it wasn't that great, especially since you cut away from the coolest parts that could have been. You know, Tarawet and Khonshu and Amit were really cool, but I'm not sure we needed to delve that deep into the whole God sphere this early. Would have liked to
yeah,
see something a little bit more grounded. Would have liked to see more episodes where we have more character development for pretty much every single character in the show. Loved Oscar Isaac. Loved Ethan Hawke. Loved May Calamaway, I believe her name is.
you were right.
They were all great, but the material that they had to work with wasn't up to snuff, in my opinion. It's like middle of the road for me. I thought it was better than Hawkeye. I liked it more than What If, but it's still on the lower end of the Marvel Cinematic Universe shows. I think the top three for me are still Loki, Falcon, and Winter Soldier, and WandaVision, probably in that order. Then Moon Knight, What If, then Hawkeye, all the way at the bottom.
So my final thoughts on it are, well, I actually didn't get to bring this up yet, so it's not
Go ahead.
technically part of my final thoughts. But I did want to say that I really like the costume design in the show. Somebody in the chat, FaZe, mentioned the Mr. Knight suit was dope. I really, really liked all of the costumes. I like the reimagining of Moon Knight's costume to be a bit more in line with thematically with like Egyptian wrappings of the dead.
Mm-hmm.
It reminds me very much. I believe if you read issue 4 or 5 of the Warren Ellis run that came out in 2014, Moon Knight is fighting some ghosts of punk rock kids who are just beating up random pedestrians on the street, and he puts on a very similar armor that's called, it doesn't really have a name, but I'd kind of come to call it the Wrappings of the Dead. And that's essentially a lot what it looks like, and it's really cool. The Mr. Knight costume I thought was very well done without it being too over the top. Again, in the comics, it's literally just a bag on his head that he has form fitted. But in this, it looks really good. I liked Layla's costume. She's basically like the Falcon, except Egyptian themed. That was cool. I liked all the costumes for all the gods. I thought they were great, and even Haru's like disciple kind of look I thought fit with the themes of the show. But my final thoughts on the show are very similar to yours without going too far into it, because I feel like you summed up everything. Is I feel like these shows need to be a little bit longer in order to focus on character development. I feel like hopefully the next time around, the next season, we get a little bit more moon knighting and a little bit less aimless running around buffoonery. And I really think that this is one of those characters that just doesn't need as much humor injected into the plot all the time.
Random side note that I forgot to bring up, but I did want to mention is
Random.
Not every superhero needs a sidekick in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I don't know what the deal is. Layla's cool, but like season 2 maybe. But like Iron Man was just Iron Man in the first one, and then War Machine showed up in the second one. That's cool. But like in every Marvel Cinematic Universe show so far, it's been 2 people. It's not, and I don't know what's going on with that. That just seems a little weird for me. Like, it's a Moon Knight show. Maybe we can do a little Moon Knight stuff and then get into Scarlet Scarab maybe in the next season. But it's like, in Loki, it was Loki and Sylvie. In Falcon and the Winter Soldier, it's in the title. In WandaVision, it's in the title. Hawkeye, it's Hawkeye and Kate Bishop. I'm just saying.
Even in the movies, it's for Phase 4, it's been that way. Like, if you think about it, Shang-Chi, he had Katie with him and then his sister the whole time. In Far From Home, all of his classmates. And Nick Fury and all those people. In No Way Home, he had 2 other Spider-Man, not to mention his classmates with him the whole time. In Doctor Strange, he had America Chavez with him the entire time. Like, we're not going to get any movies where it's just like one hero. Again, they got to have
Yeah, I don't
I
know.
don't know.
They gotta sell
Trying
more
to sell toys,
toys.
man.
Yeah.
Gotta sell toys. We both hit the same.